Just As I Am is a memoir about the long and storied life of legendary actress Cicely Tyson. Clocking in at 400 plus pages, the book discusses the nitty-gritty of her personal life and professional career. With refreshing candor, Tyson looks back over her life to discuss how the circumstances of her childhood in Harlem later shaped her relationship with herself and others. I had this book on my reading list for maybe about the time that it was released, and I fully intended to read it, but I've kept putting it off. So often the achievements and accomplishments of the Black community that you hear about come from sports and entertainment. Not to say that there's anything wrong with being an athlete or an entertainer, but I feel it's important to have balance, to tell the stories of other people, non-famous people who've achieved great things or have inspiring stories. Not this often repeated thing of the lives of a select few. But I decided that maybe it was about time for me to just go ahead and check out the book, and I ended up being very pleasantly surprised. Obviously, the book is about Cicely Tyson's life and her career, but I came to realize that I didn't really know anything about her or her career beyond like a few roles that she'd appeared in, as during her heyday in the 60s and 70s, I don't think my mother was even a figment in her parents' imagination, much less me being around. So I wasn't around when, movies such as Sounder, Roots, and whatnot premiered, but I have seen them in the years since. Cicely Tyson passed away, I want to say maybe like a year or two ago, but I had seen her in television shows and things along those lines in more recent years, where by this point she's now playing an older woman, people's mothers or grandmothers. So that's the version of Cicely Tyson that I know firsthand. But beyond that, I just knew that she was from New York and that she had some links to the Caribbean. Reading the book, I loved being pleasantly surprised learning about her. I knew that I didn't know a lot about her, but I was pleasantly surprised by what I did learn. First off, I didn't realize that she actually came to acting a bit later on in life. And in addition to that I was kind of caught off guard by her personality listening to the book. You get a feel for her as a person, and I appreciated her honesty and candor. As someone who has a channel and podcast about Black history and Black culture, I found her perspective, her openness about her experiences as a Black woman, and observations interesting and at times inspiring. I appreciated her honesty and her candor, as I feel that so often when individuals either achieve a great level of success or they're just in the public eye, there's a lot of pressure, especially I think on Black people, Black celebrities, to either be spokespeople for Black people or to kind of serve as examples of proof that we've overcome. And then having achieved success, that this gives credence and evidence to the belief that, we've overcome, things are okay, discrimination and things of that nature no longer exist. But I actually really appreciated that despite her success, despite her achievements, accomplishments, and whatever privilege she might have achieved, that Tyson still provides a very honest perspective of not just discrimination that she personally experienced, but then also an honest perspective on what it means to be a Black person, specifically a Black woman in America. And through that perspective, her view on various issues, her views on America. I was caught a bit off guard by the degree of honesty that she displayed. But let's jump back and talk about her early life and how those early experiences would later influence her as a person, her relationships, and how she moved through the world. Tyson's parents were from the Caribbean, from Nevis, and they moved to America separately. They'd known each other from the island, fell in love at a rather young age, and reunited here in America, where they dated and eventually got married. They had Cicely Tyson, her older brother, and her younger sister. Harlem at this time was the Black Mecca, and as such, this is pretty much where her parents settled once they got married and where she spent much of her early life, like her early childhood. Tyson was born with a heart murmur and some other health issues, and because of the precariousness of her health, it made her mother extremely overprotective of her. To begin with, the mom was pretty controlling anyway, but with her in particular, because she'd been born a sickly child, her mother really tried to keep her close on a tight leash out of fear for her health. I found it quite interesting, and she comments on it too, that this person who would go on to become an actress, the center of attention in so many projects, was actually a very quiet and almost shy child. That might not be an accurate description in the sense that she was indeed quiet, maybe a bit reserved, but it seems that she was observant, watching people, studying people, trying to gain an understanding of people. This might have later helped her in her career as an actress. If you think about it, you're an adult, but you're getting paid to play dress up and make believe. But part of good actors and actresses, part of their skill set, their talent, is being able to take stories, being able to take, be it plays, scripts, things like that, to take words from the page and to act them out, to convey them in a way that feels natural. And part of that is understanding humanity, emotions, how people feel, relate, communicate, and carry themselves. Her not necessarily being a participant in shenanigans, but rather watching and observing would play a role in her later acting abilities. This ability to take a character who starts out as words on a page, to ascribe them a backstory, feelings, emotions, and to then embody that. When we're living through a specific experience in the moment, we're not necessarily privy to what's going to happen in the future, or how the experiences that we have at present, and especially the experiences we have as children, how those will shape and mold us as we mature and become adults. These little moments, which is really just living, these experiences that we go through that shape who we are as people, will make us who we are. We're generally not able to see at the outset how all of those little moments, how all of those little experiences and circumstances will come together to make us the person that we're meant to be, how those childhood experiences will affect us in life. Maybe that's one of the benefits of Tyson living a very long time. At the time she was writing the book, or at its release, leading up to its release, she was like 96 years old, which is a very long life. She was blessed to have lived such a long life. At that age, sitting back and taking note of her life, looking back over her life, where at this point, some of these events, many of these events are very far into the past, at a point where you could probably now view them a bit more objectively as there's more distance. Not to say that you don't still have feelings and emotions associated with these experiences, but rather that because they've occurred at a point in the more distant past, you can have a more objective view, and then you can sit back and analyze them with maybe a little bit less emotion than you might have been able to in the days, weeks, or even years after they occurred. You end up having her not just telling her life story as far as the things that happened, the experiences she had, but also her being able to analyze them now from the perspective of an older woman who's gone on to have other experiences, who's gone on to live further and to develop a deeper understanding of not just herself, but other people as well. Just As I Am begins with her revisiting her childhood, the circumstances of her parents getting together, having her and her siblings, and then her early life growing up in Harlem. And it's pretty interesting because despite her age at the time that she wrote this book, she still had a pretty good recollection of her childhood. Looking back to moments from her childhood, you can kind of see how those early experiences, the circumstances of her childhood, influenced her later on as an adult. She had these two siblings that were more loud and outgoing. And with that, you would have different expectations for their future paths. You wouldn't expect that of her parents' three children, that she would be the one to go into this career where on screen, on stage, on television, she would be the center of attention. It would seem very outside the norm based on her early personality. It's mentioned that her parents were actually quite different, where it sounds like both parents were religious, or at least they attended church, but the mom especially so. Church played a very key role in their lives. Her parents both worked, and so there was some degree of independence from an early age. As both of the parents were off working, they kind of had to take care of themselves to some degree. Her father was, I think, a musician, which I guess played some degree of a role in her later going into the arts, as this thing of creativity, though it seemingly presented itself relatively late, was present in her as well. Even as a young kid, there's mention of her attending church with the lady who would take care of her and her siblings when her parents had to work. And they attended this woman's church on occasion. She was invited to perform and gave what sounds like a really great performance, which her father attended and was very impressed by. So from a very early age, she had this experience of venturing out on her own, doing something on her own, this little potential, this little peek into some creative ability that was there, and that there was also some interest on her part. Here was this kid that was shy, kind of reserved, wanted more hang back than to be extroverted and to put herself forward. And here it is in performing, that kind of flew out the window, where she had no problem being the center of attention. She didn't have stage fright. It kind of pushed her out of her comfort zone and into this new area, this new realm of expression. One of the things that I think I'm learning more about in life, and especially in reading about the lives of other people, is that challenges can be difficult in the moment, but quite often we grow most when we step out of our comfort zones, when we do things that aren't necessarily dangerous, but that challenge and push us to think about ourselves a little bit differently, to consider beyond what we've done, what we've been familiar with, to look into and consider how we can grow or other alternatives and paths and things for us that we might not have previously considered. That's certainly the case here. Who would have thought that such a child would not just be open to this performance, right? Actually be passionate about it, do a good job at it. It's like one of those things where as we get older, it becomes more ingrained in some of us to kind of stick to what we know. Whereas kids are more willing, especially with encouragement, to try new and different things, to experiment and step out of their comfort zones. But as we become adults, we develop this fixed idea about who we are, what we can do, what we should explore. She stepped out of her comfort zone and tried this new thing that offered a glimpse into what was to come in the future. There's a lesson to be learned in that. Tyson's parents had her older brother who was like the apple of their mother's eye. And then she was born, the first girl, and then became the apple of her father's eye. Growing up, she was to some degree a daddy's girl. But unfortunately, there was, let's say, turmoil with the parents and their relationship. During her childhood, Tyson was taken aback by her father, where here was this man that she loved, the first man that she loves. And he was such a great father to her in one respect, someone that doted on her, showered her with love and appreciation, made her feel loved, made her feel special. She was his little girl. But at the same time, her father, whatever inner turmoil and demons he was dealing with, could fly into these very angry rages. There were problems within her parents' relationship, due in part to her father constantly cheating on her mother, and then having these arguments, some of which would unfortunately become violent. And as a child, she witnessed this and on occasion ran in and tried to break up the grudge matches between these two adults that she loved. And we then see that become something present in her later relationships, or at least within one of them. Her parents ultimately broke up, and her life changed drastically after that point, where her father, who up to that point had been a constant presence in her life, not to say that he'd abandoned the family, that's not what happened, but obviously because they're now no longer living in the same household, the nature of their relationship changed. You're seeing this person less frequently versus when you were living in the same house with them. Later on, as an adult, she would meet, date, and then be married to Miles Davis, and they ended up having a tumultuous relationship, very much like the one that her parents had. Davis had his internal demons, and I think like the dad used to drink in excess. But Miles Davis had a very serious drug problem, as well as like issues with alcohol and other addictive behavior, and it wreaked havoc in their relationship. But in addition to that, he was also a serial cheater, carrying on with different women and whatnot. It's something that she points out, this thing with these two men where it's unclear if she recognized that in the moment with Miles, where here was this guy that really wasn't treating her the way that she needed to be treated, the way that she deserved to be treated. He struggled with his addiction, mental health issues, and other problems. He was kind of on the brink on more than one occasion, and she helped to nurse him back to health. It's something that you would do for someone that you love, for someone that you care about. But then when he would get better, it'd be like back to the same old nonsense. It kind of became like a cycle where he would hit rock bottom, she would help nurse him back to health, get him back on track. There would be these promises of change and getting himself together, but when he would start feeling better, he would slip back into the very things that made him sick, into this like destructive behavior. I felt like in trying to save Miles Davis from himself, he was a stand-in for her father and the self-destructive behavior she witnessed as a child. Things reached a point in the book where I was frustrated because, she's grown and this is now years later. But it's like when you have a friend who's with someone that isn't good for them at all. They're constantly breaking up, getting back together. You know this person is no good for them. And they're like crying on your shoulder about it. You kind of get tired of it after a while. And deep down inside, you're saying you should really just leave this person alone. I'm not saying that they're a bad person, and Miles Davis doesn't sound like he's a bad person, but rather I don't think the two of you are well suited to each other. And there's probably some work that this person needs to do on their own to get themselves together. I found myself getting frustrated with the back and forth with Miles Davis because it was a messy situation. And I felt like, she should just get out of this, love or no love. This person isn't a positive presence in your life. You're constantly giving to them, right? You're a positive presence in their life, but that's not being reciprocated. And it's not a healthy relationship. It's a very dysfunctional relationship, especially because there's various incidents and events that take place, and there's some back and forth as they broke up and were apart for years, then got back together later on and ended up getting divorced. Ultimately, that was for the best. Getting together the second time, at this point, these were very, very grown people. I think the first time was like in the 60s, maybe into the 70s. And the second time was like the late 70s into the early 80s. And so they had this very tumultuous relationship, passionate, but tumultuous. I appreciated the insights that she offered in recounting the second phase of their relationship, the time when they'd gotten back together and like actually got married this time. You know, she had misgivings and whatnot. She'd had other things going on in her life by this point, such as like losing her parents. This distinguishes something that you see in other adults, where these early experiences, the things we witness as children, we don't fully appreciate at the time, but they later influence who we are as people, but also the relationships that we have with others. In this case, seeing this tumultuous and dysfunctional relationship between her parents, where here was this man that she loved, her father, who was doing everything possible to blow up his life. Deep down inside, he's a good and decent person, but self-destructive at the same time. The constant back and forth with her mother, and then her relationship with her father suffering as well due to his anger problems. He used to party hard and whatnot, and then come home to argue and carry on. The dysfunction that she witnessed as a child influenced her and the type of relationship that she got into with Miles Davis. You have this very passionate and dysfunctional relationship where he indulged in a lot of the same behaviors that her father did, which would then lead to them arguing much as her mother and father did. I think it was maybe a year or two ago that I reviewed a documentary about Miles Davis and learned about the relationship between his mother and father. Their relationship was dysfunctional and violent at times. And so it's like, here it is that you have these two people who witnessed these dysfunctional relationships between their parents, or rather the adults around them when they were children, and they grew up to repeat much of the same behavior to get into much of the same kind of relationships. In her case, it goes into this thing of introspection, asking yourself questions and assessing yourself in your relationships with other people, trying to gain a deeper understanding of yourself, and with that, an understanding of why things are going wrong for you. She was eventually able to recognize that in continuing and prolonging this relationship with Miles Davis, which she herself admits she'd had some misgivings about them getting married, she knew that she needed to leave him, that the relationship wasn't healthy, but for whatever reason just kept holding on. Eventually, she too came to realize that basically Miles Davis was like a stand-in for her father, this person that she loved passionately, but who had some inner demons that they were dealing with. And in this situation with Miles Davis, the best thing to do was to leave him. She eventually reached the point where she had enough, much as her mother did her father. At that point, I applauded. You're never happy for anyone to break up, but I think in some situations, people aren't well suited for each other, or they're not in a healthy space within themselves where they would be able to be in a healthy relationship with another person. And so with that, they need to be by themselves for a while to do some work on themselves. The Miles Davis situation frustrated me to no end, but ultimately, I respected and appreciated the insights that she offered looking back on that relationship. Cicely Tyson became a model, then an actress, because she was looking for some kind of change in her life, but wasn't exactly sure of what. I think it was like some guy on the street that told her she could be a model. And then she began looking into it, going out on modeling auditions with agencies. And she got into modeling by chance, but then began taking acting lessons. People talk about luck versus talent or hard work and ability. And it's something that I'm coming to learn and realize that I think what we think about, with regards to luck, it's sort of like the same as like the lottery or gambling, where it's odds and chances. But what I think luck is, or as I'm getting to better understand, is that it seems to be luck is more having the vision, the ambition, the drive, the hunger for more, and putting in the effort to prepare yourself, putting in the hard work required, using that vision to prepare yourself for when opportunities present themselves. Luck isn't necessarily like hitting the lottery. Those are odds, right? Pretty slim odds of something just out of this world amazing happening for you. What luck really is, what's the more realistic vision or my interpretation of luck, is taking the time to put in the work to prepare yourself for when opportunities present themselves. You hear a lot of times people struggle for years, and it's unfortunate, some never really achieve success in whatever their endeavor might be. And that's unfortunate because they are putting in the work. It's just that the opportunities don't present themselves. But what I've learned, or what I've come to realize and notice, is that with the people who have what we would call luck, or people who become overnight successes, quite often especially if they're able to sustain that success for a length of time, rather than it just being a quick spurt and then falling off or them losing everything, is that in the lead up to that moment, they've been preparing. They first envisioned it. They wanted more. They didn't know what exactly it was, or they might have just been dreaming. But even that, there's a distance between people who want more and people who go after more. Where, sure, it starts with the vision, but you have some people that dream and dream and dream and dream, but they never put in the work, so they don't go anywhere. Beyond that, you then have the next level, the people who dream of more. They might not know exactly how they're going to get there, but they put the work in to prepare. In this case with Cicely Tyson, she envisioned a different life for herself, a better life than this thing of working in secretary pools, typist pools for decades to come for the rest of her life. She envisioned a better life for herself, but then the different factors that she started to work towards that. She started to prepare for it. And so with that, she took steps to become a model. Then, when opportunities presented themselves, she took the steps to start taking acting classes, learning how to put together characters and prepare for a role. So when opportunities to appear in plays and then later in television and movies presented itself, she was ready to take advantage of those opportunities. Or if she wasn't completely ready, she'd done some of the legwork to the point where she could catch up to take advantage of the opportunity instead of being forced to let it pass her by or taking on the opportunity and then failing at it because she was unprepared. If anything, that's the message that I took from Just As I Am. The perspective that she offered on relationships, but then also this thing of dreaming, envisioning more for yourself, and then making it a reality. Because you see where she started out in life, and then 96 years later, this completely unexpected career that she's had, it's given her maybe not everything that she dreamed of, but much of it. Maybe not everything she thought she wanted, but a lot of the things she needed to feel happy and fulfilled in life. As I Am is an incredible book. I was really surprised by how much I ended up liking it. There's a lot of other things to dive into, but I don't want this to be like a rehashing of the book. And I don't want to go through the laundry list of her career and the film she appeared in. But these were the major themes that spoke to me. Understanding yourself, reassessing your childhood, gaining an understanding of the things that you might have seen and experienced in your childhood, the behaviors that you learned in your childhood that aren't serving you well, right? And making the decision to let them go. And then beyond that, envisioning better for yourself and working towards it. And so with that, I highly recommend this book. Thanks for tuning in. Show notes are available on the Noir Histoire website via the link in the episode description. If you enjoyed this episode and want more book recommendations, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell, and check out my book review playlist.